Hey, it's that Deadeye guy. Let's talk about Kingdom Come: Deliverance, developed by Warhorse Studios. This title is very deep, a bit of an ocean of content as far as RPGs go. This review took me a little while to put together because I wanted to make sure that I put enough time into the game to give it a good deep dive review. While you could easily spend 100 hours in this title, I finished the main quest as well as a decent chunk of side quests in a little over 43 hours. Kingdom Come is the first high-budget, open-world RPG set in late medieval period Bohemia. That's the westernmost piece of the Czech Republic, saved you a Google. You play a young blacksmith's boy named Henry. After a lengthy prologue, you are given full reins of Henry's story and are free to take him wherever you wish to roam. Naturally, the game gives the breadcrumbs to continue along the main story, should you choose to do so, but the entire land of Bohemia is open to you from the moment the first act begins. I've played a lot of high fantasy RPGs in my time, and this game stands out among all of them as being as historically accurate as feasibly possible while still making for an entertaining game. You'll find no elves or magic in Bohemia. This is the first RPG that has had such a solid connection to the real world and real historical events that it made me much more interested in the world it presented. I greatly enjoyed learning about certain parts of human history. It's why the first couple of Assassin's Creed games pulled me in so rapidly. While somewhat clunky, Kingdom Come is an amazing window into human civilization during the early 1400s. I fired up this title knowing that the developers had taken great care to make a true-to-life historical RPG. I also knew that there were a multitude of systems and skills within the game that you can undertake if you wanted to, completely unrelated or required by the main storyline. This is about as true an open RPG from the medieval simulator point of view as you could possibly get without introducing mechanics that would take the simulation a bit too far and deter from overall enjoyment. Henry starts off as a completely blank slate. He's terrible at basically everything and isn't even literate, very common for sons of tradesmen at the time. It's up to you to groom Henry into what he's going to be skilled at through using those abilities in his travels. I elected to make Henry a steel-clad juggernaut, so strength, vitality, and swordsmanship were my primary skills. You're free to train whatever you like though. There's no limitations, and given enough time, you'd be able to make Henry amazing at everything in the game. This approach works well as the game doesn't make it obvious how to improve yourself, nor does it require you to visit trainers every session just to improve your skills. Even all the mechanics of combat aren't shown to you or Henry until you seek out one of the guard captains to have him teach you. At the beginning of the game, you feel like a very small person in a very big world. Henry isn't a noble, nor is he wearing anything that would distinguish him as the stereotypical hero of the story. In fact, Henry is very plain in every way. His model could easily be used as a generic NPC, and that's a good thing. It gives you more credence to the protagonist being an everyman. This game would not have the same feel if you were some strong-jawed lord that saved the land from unspeakable evils through feats of absurdity. It does bend reality a little bit, and allows you to masterfully carve through waves of enemies in combat. Even the best swordsman at the time wouldn't be able to handily defeat multiple attackers at once. But it still feels realistic, and that's a big part of what gives Kingdom Come its charm. The story takes Henry on a modified version of the hero's journey, but in a realistic way that fits with the overall setting. Spoiler alert, Henry doesn't become king of the planet by the time you finish the main questline. It is satisfying, however, with some truly memorable moments that really made me care about the characters. One particular story event with the priest from Ujits had me grinning from ear to ear. The events occurring around you are ripped directly from history. The opening cinematic that sets the stage for the setting might as well be a quick history lesson. While we're on the topic of history, the historical accuracy in this title is staggering. The developers went far beyond what is generally expected of a video game in terms of keeping close to what actually happened in older societies. You can be sure that pretty much everything you see in the game is true what was actually used 600 years ago. The clothing and armor are all accurate to the styles of the day. The various engineering and craftsman devices from the watermill to a blacksmith's forge are very close to what was common in the countryside of Eastern Europe. You can take a good look at these devices in-game and find that the developers were meticulous in ensuring that the engineering made sense and were accurate for the period. This game made me look up what coal burners were as a profession because I had absolutely no idea that they were a thing until I met them in the game. Kingdom Come absolutely shines with its environments. The world building here is top-notch. Forests feel like actual forests rather than invisible barriers or auto-generated foliage. Taking a stroll into the tree line around a town or along a made road really gives you the feeling of roaming the countryside with their visual design and sounds. Forests are also very different from each other depending on the region. Some are damper than others and will feel more like small swamps. Some will have significantly denser tree distribution and wildlife. Regardless of which forest you happen to be taking a leisurely stroll through, it's hard not to recognize that this game has the best forests in the business. The fantastic environments aren't just limited to the wilds though. Towns and castles are very well crafted. NPCs have their daily routines and behave on their own schedule regardless of where Henry is. You can often hear conversations between NPCs discussing current events or just random musings of the day. Castles are significantly smaller than the grandiose settings that we're all used to in high fantasy settings, again keeping to historical accuracy. A look at the Rete of today against what is in the game is really all you need to see how much care was taken in crafting this game's setting. The sound quality is overall pretty great, with my only complaint being that some of the environmental loops start to be noticeable once you put some time into it. As you progress and wander forests, you'll hear the same dog barking off in the distance every 20 minutes or so. Environments do affect the sound around you though. If you initiate a conversation in a church, the voices will have a deep echo just as they would in that setting. As you guide your horse around Bohemia, its hoof sounds will change as you cross bridges and stone roads as opposed to dirt paths. As swords and maces connect with armor, you hear a very realistic clack as opposed to some absurd sound that we've come to be used to in regular fantasy RPGs. It's very evident that the combat sounds were recorded by bashing some imitation armor with imitation weaponry within a sound studio. This whole package of sound quality is something I really appreciated and was great for the immersion of the game. Items and equipment come in layers, just as they did in the Middle Ages. You didn't just strap a breastplate to your chest, you usually had a gambeson or even chainmail underneath for added comfort and protection. This applies to all parts of the body, head, torso, and legs. My Henry was a bruiser, so I essentially walked around in full plate mail at all times. I generally wasn't going to win many conversational battles with my dull wit. Wearing the armor did give me an edge in intimidating people though, making up for my inability to use regular old persuasion. Every piece of equipment you wear has a wide set of characteristics attached to them. A black gambeson will offer you some protection, but it will also greatly lower your visibility and conspicuousness. Wearing some plate pauldrons on your arms will offer a great deal of protection, but will be loud and greatly hinder your ability to sneak around undetected. All of these equipment choices need to be taken into consideration depending on the task you're trying to accomplish, unless you're like me and solve most situations with violence. Combat is interesting, but a bit janky. This was one of my concerns when I mentioned Kingdom Come in my most anticipated titles of 2018 video. You can swing multiple directions with a left-click slash, or perform a quick stab with the right-click. Once you get some skill, you can chain these directional attacks into special combinations that have added effects and inflict additional damage. Even through all the time I spent in combat, I still never fully got the hang of the combat system. I never really got beaten in a battle unless I was thoroughly outnumbered, but a lot of my victories came from wearing down the stamina of my opponent by forcing them to constantly block, and then scoring a few nasty shots through sheer attrition. I'm sure there's something deeper in the combat system, but I never took the time to look up guides or YouTube videos of people who had figured it out. It was still enjoyable though, and landing hits on enemies was very satisfying. There were a lot of pretty interesting quests in this game, and the journal does a great job of tracking them for you. I really appreciated that it separates side quests from activities. The former is a more robust quest that could include a wide chain of tasks and maybe even some story content, while the latter is basically just fetch quest style tasks. It helped me prioritize what I wanted to accomplish to really get to the meat and potatoes of the game, rather than wasting a bunch of time gathering mushrooms for a few coins. One quest that fell flat for me was a portion where you're asked to join the local monastery as a monk. I get what the developers were trying to go for here, giving the player some deep insight on what it meant to be a monk in those days, but the entire quest chain lost its luster for me after the first day. It was the only time playing this game that I really wanted to hurry up and move on to the next piece of the story, because what I was currently doing wasn't very interesting. I think that piece of the story could have been better executed. With all that praise out of the way, there are quite a few criticisms of this game, though none of them are what I would consider massively game-breaking. Loading times became very tedious for me. I have a fairly powerful system, and it was evident at the outset that Kingdom Come was not very well optimized, as load times were from doing simple things like engaging a merchant to sell things took way too long. During the first couple of hours I didn't mind so much as I was still in the honeymoon phase of the game, but once I got 10 plus hours in, it became very noticeable, and I found myself browsing the internet during load times, ruining overall immersion. It's pretty easy to break this game in a variety of ways. Once you discover bandit camps and that you can become very wealthy by hauling all of their armor back to town to sell, you end up maxing out your equipment very early in the game. I spent the early part of my playthrough eradicating bandits and continuing on with the main story with among the best gear you can acquire. I beat the first major boss in a single hit, and he didn't do any damage to me because of this. This might be intentional, and it still allows the player to roleplay if they want to, but I found that applying the usual strategy I have in RPGs to Kingdom Come made my character absurdly powerful, and I didn't have much challenge in combat until the middle of the story. I understand why the developers didn't put in arbitrary limitations like restricting the type of armor that bandits wear, or that armorers will sell to you until a player reaches a certain point. It was just something that personally took a little bit away from the game for me. Other mechanics can also break combat. A friend of mine went for a pure agility and archery build with some alchemy mixed in. He reported that it is laughably easy to take down a small army by himself simply by firing poison-laced arrows from horseback Ocarina of Time style. One poisoned arrow would inhibit an enemy to the point of uselessness, and subsequent arrows would finish them off. Again, I'm not sure if this is intentional or not, but having a game that does so well in the realism department be pushed over so easily in a major component like combat is disappointing. Rendering issues are pretty rampant. No matter what your video settings are at, you'll find issues moving around and talking to people. A conversation will begin, but the NPC hasn't completely rendered just yet, so you start off by talking to a putty monster until the graphics engine catches up with the actual game. This also affects the environment. Buildings and other structures will often not immediately render as you enter an area, leaving you to look at a clay world. If this happened occasionally, I could ignore it, as open world titles like this are kinda hard to pull off. The fact that it happened routinely, combined with long loading times, made it something that really started to grind on me. Bugs. Bugs absolutely plagued this game, though I will caveat that with the fact that none of the bugs in my playthrough were so game-breaking that it destroyed my will to continue playing. I did have friends put the game down, however. They had lost hours of progress because of the numerous save bugs or bugs affecting NPCs and the reactions to Henry. I lost an hour of progress once because an NPC that I absolutely had to speak to progress the main storyline refused to speak to me because he had picked a fight with me and I knocked him out. After the incident, I could no longer engage in conversation with him, causing me to have to load a previous save from before he tried to fight me. These types of experiences are very common across the player base. Warhorses acknowledge that they wish they had had more time for polish, and so do I. I'd have gladly given this game another year if they would have devoted that time to squashing bugs and polishing mechanics. With all that being said, I still love this game, and it pains me to see it released with all the problems that it clearly has. Discussing with friends and evaluating my thoughts on it, I'd have considered Kingdom Come a masterpiece if it had been delivered bug-free and with some of the game mechanics more hashed out than the bare-bones versions we got. Regardless, this title is fantastic, and no other game allows you to open a door into history quite like this. I'm giving Kingdom Come Deliverance an 8 out of 10. Thanks for watching. What did you think of Kingdom Come? Let me know down below or over on Twitter. And if you'd like to support the channel, why not like this video and subscribe? Until next time.